now we are on our BFSI panel discussion on how banks and financial institutions are making the most of AI. Well, we're looking at talking about putting AI at the core of any organization, business, and operating models. We're looking at talking about exploring the ways AI will impact the future of work. We're looking at talking about accelerating digital transformation using AI, data analytics, and hybrid cloud in the post-pandemic world, solving uncertain and variable supply and demand in the market through data analytics, geopolitics of AI, and using AI and data analytics to predict and support operations and supply disruptions, suboptimal workforce allocation, and changing consumer confidence and priorities, and much more. Well, we'd request if you may have any question for our eminent panelists, please do post it in the Q&A tab. It'll be picked up and answered at the end of the session if time allows. Well, with this, I'd like to now welcome all our eminent panelists on your stage and screen. First up, we're joined by Dan Jermyn, the Commonwealth Bank Chief Data Scientist. Well, Dan is an experienced leader in both technology and data science with an established record of building award-winning global teams in digital, big data, and customer decisions. Dan joined the Commonwealth Bank of Australia in 2007, where he has a responsibility of delivering great customer experience and innovative new solutions through data science. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us and giving us your valuable time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on the other side, we're joined by Shira Sagar, Latitude Financial Services Chief Data Officer. Shira has spent 21.7% of his life helping key decision makers and CXOs make smart decisions using data, and strongly believes that every organization can become truly data-driven. Thank you so much, Shira, for joining us and giving us your valuable time. Well, also we're joined by Soni Supriyadi, the SVP Head Pricing and Data Analytics, Maybank Indonesia. Soni is a seasoned professional and has been assigned to various pricing and data analytics initiatives in Asia, Europe, and North America. These include leading transformations to optimize existing or newly established platform or departments, from developing people and organization business model processes, as well as systems and platforms. Thank you so much, Soni, for joining us today and giving us your valuable time. Well, also this entire panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be moderated by Neil Cross, co-founder and chairman, Pitcher Wealth. Neil is a globally recognized corporate, social, and a startup entrepreneur with a long track record across blue chip technology, finance, and data companies. He's currently the co-founder and chairman of Pitcher Wealth. Prior to this, Cross was the chief innovation officer at the DBS Bank. Thank you so much, Neil, for joining us today and giving us your valuable time. Well, with this, ladies and gentlemen, I now request all our eminent panelists to please join us on the stage and screen by turning your video on. Neil, with this, I'm going to be passing you the live baton. Once again, a big welcome to all our eminent panelists on behalf of TressCon. Thank you for joining us. Over to you, Neil.
Excellent, thank you. It's a great honor to be invited at this auspicious event with these great panelists. In fairness, I don't know why they asked me. I mean, I can't even spell AI, but I'm sure we'll get through it. I joke. I've done a little bit of AI, you know, AI is such a vast subject, and for me, it's the most impactful, you know, of the three big kind of technology trends affecting finance at the moment. Of, you know, AI, cloud, and blockchain, in not any particular order, but AI certainly, for me, the number one. And you know, it's a huge field, very complex, from supervised to unsupervised, from narrow to general AI, and you know, from and my kind of favorite AI, which is very prominent, I find, in startups, especially in startup pitches to venture capital, is this AI called it's spelled LI. I'm not sure if you've seen that one. It's a lie, and so I'm sure we've all heard it. You know, you know, once you scratch under the surface of the code, there actually is an AI. It's basic data analytics, or you know, it's a logic tree, or if it's if then else statements. But we don't have to worry about that today, because we have some top ranked experts in the region around AI in financial services. So let's get into it. What I really want to dig into first is, you all work for significant financial entities, and it's very hard to get anything, done in finance, especially anything new. So I'd like to go to Dan first. Last time I looked, Combank, I think I had about 50, 60,000 staff, which is a pretty massive organization. Dan, how do you set up an organization of that size to deliver on AI?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Great to be here. First off, welcome and good morning, or if indeed it is the morning where everybody is joining us from around the world. I think you touched on the fact there that Combank is a huge institution and by far the largest retail bank in Australia, and with a tremendous responsibility to serve a very large proportion of the Australian public through services. And so for AI, that's just a part of the overall cohesive strategy that we have to serve our customers better. And I think it's one of the really kind of important key things in the way that we think about applying AI at scale. From a Combank perspective is, what's the bank's overall purpose and what part does AI play in that? Not as a bolt-on, something that we have to do in a box somewhere off to the side because AI is a big new thing and it's a thing that we have to somehow deal with, but rather it's a fundamental enabler for everything that we're trying to do to make our customers' lives better. And so for us, it's, I won't say easy, but it's a natural fit, a natural extension of everything that we were doing anyway. That's not to say it's straightforward. To apply AI at scale in an organization such as ours takes a coalition of very talented experts, but experts across a wide variety of fields and specialisms. So my title quite specifically is Chief Decision Scientist, not Data Scientist. And within my function of decision science, we have a constellation of people with different skill sets. We have AI specialists with 20 years experience in the most advanced deep learning that you can possibly do. We have practicing data scientists and modelers who are kind of embedded within the business, working on problems every day. We have experimentation scientists. We have people thinking about ethics and explainability. We have a reasonably large chunk of my team, somewhere around about, I think it's 10 to 15% of whom started their career with Combank on the front line, serving customers in branch or on telephony. And it takes all of those people to really apply AI in the way that's compatible with what we as an institution are trying to do for our customers. And so that's one of the kind of key enablers that we have, is a confederation of people all pulling together with different skills, but with a common purpose. You can't think of AI as a kind of box somewhere off to the side. It has to be embedded in the culture of what the bank is trying to do.
Now that's interesting. And what engagement do you have from the business in that? I presume there's high levels of engagement. It's not purely a technology.
Yeah. Again, it's a question I get asked a lot. How do you get the business on board? I think if you're solving problems for the business and for the customers that we have, then it's not a hard sell at all. And actually, if you're doing a good job of it, it doesn't feel like something is being done that has to be bought into. I'll give you a great example. One of our flagship AI implementations is our customer engagement engine. That is a very sophisticated AI decisioning platform. We run 400 machine learning models over 157 billion data points. And the end output of that is that across every single one of the Commonwealth Bank's channels, in branch, on telephony, in the Combank app, through email or SMS or push notification, whatever way you do business with us, we have a consolidated view of what is the right thing to talk to you about as a customer at any point in time. What we call it the next best conversation. And really what we're trying to do there is create a personalized experience that allows the customer to know that the bank understands them and is working in their interest to give them a really great experience. And that sounds like a great thing to do for the business and for customers. The fact that it's powered by AI is a necessary enabler to do it at the incredible scale that we do. We have something like 20 to 30 million decisions being made every day, and we couldn't possibly do that without AI. But from a business or customer perspective, it's just great banking. And that's easy to get buy-in for.
Yeah, because I've always, waited for the day where everyone's got their own kind of, private banker essentially, and that can only be done with tech. at the mass, taking that kind of high, relationship management, either in high corporate, taking it down to SME or private banking, getting that down to consumer banking. That's really impressive numbers. So it kind of leads me on to I love the fact that you're focusing about solving people's problems and customer problems. And we know as well that inside organizations, it's not just the customers who get affected by AI. It's the internal staff members, and how do you organize around a transformation? So thank you, Sonny. Let's go to thank you for being our last minute stand-in today. And I know that you have to leave a little earlier than the rest of the panelists, but you jumped in there at the last minute and you're in the UK. So Selamat Pagi. So Sonny, please talk me through the work you're doing at Maybank around the transformation and your views on that with AI.
I'm currently responsible on the transformation with regards to pricing and data analytics. Actually, I'm quite new with the role. Has been appointed mid 2019 to set up a completely new divisions. So I had to do the recruitment stuff and so on. And then one of the challenges there is not a matter of getting vendors and set up all the AI capabilities, but also preparing people. That's the most interesting part of the job, I guess, coming from here in the UK and then looking to the Indonesian market, and then resources and slightly vast difference. And that could be a challenge as well. But on the other hand, it could be an opportunity for me to expand, to learn more from the people that I'm working with and the customers that I'm serving with. And yes, so that's my kind of role at this stage, still developing the foundations and then people, process, and platform.
And what challenges are you kind of experiencing in engaging kind of the staff component and people into AI projects?
Yes, number one is I think Dan mentioned earlier, one of the key words in AI, explainability. That's one of the words that, it's hard. It's easy to understand that in a way, but how to explain AI for the common people, quote, quote, is not that simple. So one of the tasks there. And the second one is the challenge in getting a talent. So that's also one of the aspects that we currently facing. There's a lot of fintech in Indonesia currently, a few unicorns there. And basically we're fighting with them as well as a competitor in getting talent. So what do we do? I'm starting developing AI, machine learning, and data science academy internally in the bank. So we serve candidates from various departments dealing with the data previously, mostly looking backward data. We want to look forward data in terms of prediction, prescriptive, and so on and so forth. So that's we're quite new, I guess, in that sense. And to add on that complexity, we also have a legacy system. So I think it's facing that everyone, I guess, when they are dealing to transform something, they need to look at what actually they've been doing so far, what system they've been using. So I'm trying to get that done through, I think one of the discussion here is about how to move from on-prem to cloud, for example. That's one of the platforms they are currently use. So we move from that to another one. So hybrid is the word that we are currently using, and then still in progress, integrating data, utilizing data governance as well. So that's another challenge as well. So yes, a mountain to climb.
Yeah, a lot of challenges. I remember when I was at one of your stage at DBS, and it was very difficult just finding data and finding owners of data and finding systems. So and then it's like a huge, we'll work fairly large finance companies, certainly used to, quite as big as Commonwealth. But then it's like, okay, so where is it actually located and who owns it? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, and then we had to set up all these structures around permission. So then who owns all this data in the organization? When do they release it to another division? What's the permissioning on that? What level of data? And all that kind of construct, that was incredibly difficult to go through. But you know, that a lot of the, and that's the thing, I suppose, data is the fuel of AI. You know, that's without that, you're not going to get to the end result. Shira, what about yourself? Congratulations, by the way, on your IPO yesterday. Was it yesterday? A couple of days ago?
A couple of days ago, that's right, Neil. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the share price has held quite well, so you haven't done a Deliveroo, which is a surprise. You joined the session. I thought you still would have been partying by now. It's a pretty good price. Is that anyway? So talk us through you know, your business and how you're utilizing AI in transformation.
Thanks, Neil. And I think I just probably want to, most of what I would have said, Dan has covered it, and so did Sony. The idea that AI is not around just customer benefits, but also employee benefits, or internal customers, as I like to call them. But apart from that aspect, for me, having come from a retail digital native background, I see that there are a few things that what it means for us and what we are trying to do with AI is, one, the awareness of what it can and can't do. And I think you did allude to the point of the fact that people either tend to think it's completely Skynet or they think it's complete rubbish, and then trying to balance that and say what it can and can't do. Because I've been in conversations with people and who've said, well, you think you can solve this problem? Why don't you solve world hunger? And I'm like, world hunger will wait a few more days, but can we just solve this problem with data and AI? So trying to have that conversation, create that awareness of what it can and can't do is what we're trying to work on. And also, once we have the awareness of what it is, then the intention to start using it into changing how they operate. And what happens is immediately the next question that comes in is, yes, we can use an algorithm to come up with a better outcome, or as Dan mentioned, a better decision. But how is that decision made and taken? If somebody's used to making a decision a particular way, how can we help him or her make it in a different way using the same tools that they use? And how do we integrate it into those platforms and end customer tools or end employee tools? I think that's the next big challenge that we're working on. And the third one is the easiest challenge, and the challenge that is not at all something that we're worried about or we don't lose sleep on, is actually implementing the algorithm, because that's the easy part, or getting it up and running and making it work. I think the challenges surrounding the before and after of it is the part where we are very curious. We are on a journey and trying to understand how we operate and how we structure ourselves differently. You are on mute, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on mute. That's interesting insight. Actually, you say that the decisioning is the easy bit on that, and so, you know, what do you think's the hardest bit? Is it the getting the data? Is it convincing the business to use it? Is it getting the tech resources? What do you think is? I mean, I'll open that to anyone. What is the toughest nut to crack, do you find, in scaling an AI strategy?
I think everyone's willing and happy. I'm sorry to jump in. Everyone's willing and happy to use it because they've heard about it. Everyone talks about it. There are obvious benefits. But I think the challenge is, I like to call it as the rom-com issue, right? Like any romantic comedy, falling in love is not the challenge. Nobody shows what happens once you've fallen in love and gotten married, right? What happens afterwards? It's the same thing with AI. Implementing it is definitely not the challenge, or getting someone excited by it is not the challenge. But once you've implemented it and it's put in production, how do we monitor, manage, maintain it, and make sure that it does what it's supposed to do and it keeps running and going well and functioning for what it needs to do? I think that part of the process, what banks used to call model governance in the good old days, and used to be just one code refreshed every 6 months, won't stand the test of time. So there needs better ways of doing all of that stuff and understanding the validity and accuracy of these things. So that's where I find the next big challenge is in terms of implementing AI.
Interesting. Anyone else?
I'll maybe come in there too. So she was making, and Sunny, indeed, it's great to be in this community where we're all talking about things in exactly the same way and clearly have all of the same kind of thoughts and challenges. And I agree with so much of what's been said. I think yeah, scale is certainly one of the things that we've had to solve for in the Commonwealth Bank. We have just a huge amount of data, and increasingly the kind of the value that we can bring from AI does depend on massive data sets, and also a lot of the time real time. I mean, Shira talked about the importance of new approaches to model monitoring governance. That's something that we've had to deal with in a huge way within the bank. The machine learning that we have that powers the CommBank app, for example, we have an estate of 400 machine learning models, and they're adapting in real time. So every single one of those millions of interactions every day is updating the fabric of that model. That doesn't fit with the bank's traditional model governance framework. So we had to introduce new controls, alerts, frameworks that allow us to do that safely at scale. I think one of the great things about it, though, is that the impact that you can have is clearly worth it. And so there are challenges, but there are things that you can do now that you previously just simply could not have done. And I think where we were talking about, AI is not the be all and end all, and you can't have somebody say, well, just go and solve all of these problems with AI. The flip side is that if you think creatively about it, there are brand new things that nobody is asking you to do that you are able to do with AI if you think outside the box about what's possible. One of the really good examples of this within the CommBank app is our benefits finder capability. So this is what we use to connect our customers with government rebates or sources of benefits or offers that customers are eligible for that are outside of the bank's purview. It may be things like compulsory third-party insurance rebates or toll relief, unclaimed monies that customers are due for. And we use machine learning to connect our customers with these sources. What a brilliant thing to do. And at the scale that we do it, we've been able to return $500 million worth of value to customers from money that they were entitled to just by using AI through the CommBank app. So that's not something that previously would have even been dreamt of as the thing that we could have done, but AI has opened the door for us to do that.
Wow, that's incredible. That really is incredible. I'm going to sign up for that. Just to take a look. It looks brilliant. And the beautiful thing is you're giving your customers $500 million, and of course it's not your money. So that's the wonderful.
It's their money.
Thing.
It's their money.
Yeah. You're giving them $500 million from someone else's pool. And so, Sonny, I know that you have to drop off shortly. How do you see that your organization, because you're doing a lot of kind of training and planning and starting your journey, how do you think it's going to change the way that people are going to work in the future in your mind?
Yes, before we going into that, I think I'd like to add the previous question about what's the challenges. I think it depends on where you are in the journey. That's number one. We need to understand where we are and where we're starting from. Once we know where we're starting from, then hopefully it will be easier where we want to go to. So I guess that's his message to myself and also for everyone that want to start it on this journey. Need to look at where you are coming from and what resources you have and so on. So in terms of how this can affect people, obviously depends as well. Your organization, sometimes you need to do hard sell. Sometimes it's buy in very easily. Depends where you are. In my case, I don't have to sell it that hard. I mean, it's quite obvious. The password of AI has been everywhere. People wanted to see how you're going to implement this in this bank. That's obviously the first question they would ask. So yes, we've done that, and then we've managed to get buy-in immediately by providing. Number one is automation. Quote, make the life easier. Obviously, the team that's been utilizing AI, I think Dan also mentioned that can be done very quickly. You don't need 5 people. You need 2 people or just not even people there. That can be done through machine. The question from human resource would be, what should we do with these people? If you're utilizing AI, there's an impact on those types.
Yeah,
so,
that's a big conversation, isn't it? Is, robotic process automation, I think, is a big driver of that. And we know that, a lot of banks, a lot of their staff bases are operations, which, a lot of them are basically doing stuff that's too hard for the computers to do.
Correct, yes.
And so what's Maybank's thoughts on that? on those, what happens with those stuff?
Yeah, we retrain them. Number one, we train them in seeing AI as a benefit. That's number one. How can we see those as an asset? Again, bank is one of the most regulated organization here. So we cannot just slash and dice people that easily. We need to retrain them and then channel them so that they can utilize AI, can be useful for this kind of initiative. The AI itself is not the main initiative. The main initiative is digitalization. From Maybank point of view, how can we support that main frame of digitalization so that people can utilize not only the tools, but also utilize their time, their energy so efficiently? How can they utilize that remotely? Using what we have currently with the C-19 pandemic, we utilize AI as well, knowing that how can you do the KYC very quickly? That's also part of it. I mean, there's a lot of example on that. I'm sorry, but I need to leave it 8:59 in my time.
Well, thank you, Sonny. It's been a great stand-in, and really appreciate it. Thanks for your insight.
Okay, thank you. So sorry about this, everyone. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
So we have a little bit of time left. Now, I want to touch on ethics in AI, if that's okay. And it's quite I'll tell you a story. I was chatting to the head of AI at one of the tech companies. I won't tell you who, and they pulled out of a project in the US at the Department of Justice for AI judges, and so they were using AI to judge criminal cases. And they pulled out of the project, and it was a big multi-billion-dollar project. I said, no, we just walked away. I said, why? And they said our AI was racist. Because, of course, historically, the courts have made decisions over time which have been human and historically a lot of some of those have been racist. Of course, as we know, you take training data, you pull it into a learning engine, and then get AI to score it. And so that blew my head off in terms of some of the ethical considerations, thinking, of course, yeah, humans in the past haven't been perfect. And now, as we know, AI is very complex. So I said to the head of AI at Microsoft, I said, yeah, but you're experts, can't you just tune in? He said, no, it doesn't work like that. These are massive court record data sets. We can't just kind of reach into the AI engine and make it, rebalance the kind of, the race algorithm. It doesn't work like that. But anyway, that was a real insight, blew my mind away and really brought my attention to the ethics piece. So what say you, Dan and Shira, around the ethics? Is there anything you're kind of, obviously now in finance, we hopefully won't see anything that extreme. Is there anything you're bumping up against that you have to be concerned around with ethics?
For sure. I think everybody who's working in AI has to be concerned about ethics, but everybody who's working in business has to be concerned about ethics. I mean, the example that you provide there is shocking and a stark illustration about how important it is to maintain the human sense of what is right or wrong in anything that we do. It's incredibly important for us as a bank to, and actually, I in my introduction, I mentioned that, my title was Chief Decision Scientist rather than Data Scientist. That's very deliberately chosen, and all stages we have humans in the loop making decisions and judgments themselves about not could we do this thing, but should we do this thing? Is it right to do that? Ethics is a school of philosophy that goes back thousands of years, and I don't think there is a programmatic way to solve for ethics. But certainly what you can do from an AI perspective is address some of the unique challenges that arise from when you're making decisions at scale in ways that are increasingly complicated in a way that a human couldn't necessarily entirely understand. And so at the bank, we think about this in two ways. The first we've touched on previously is explainability. It's non-trivial to think about how one explains how an AI system has reached a particular type of decision, particularly if you're using a very complex deep learning model. But there are solutions for this, and we've developed them. We have an explainable AI toolkit, sits on top of our AI stack and allows us to say, at a global or at an individual customer level, what were the key drivers behind a particular decision? And that's, regardless of the AI or statistical methodology that was used to engineer the features and create the model. So at a high level, you can kind of explain how you got to a particular type of result in terms of the drivers of that. And the second is in terms of disparity measurement and checks for unintended bias. Now, algorithms and models are kind of by design supposed to discriminate. They're supposed to treat people in different ways, but they are not supposed to unfairly discriminate. And so we introduce things like checking for particular types of subgroups. How do we make sure that we're having the right kind of responses across different types of customer pools that fit with our expectation and that we're happy with? And that's always a kind of human decision. So we provide the tooling to allow humans to get a great understanding of the systems that we develop, what the implications are for customers, and then whether we, as representatives of the bank, are happy that the results that we get to are fair. A really good example of this is kind of age, right? It may be, let's pick a particular type of model where it's unfair to use age as discrimination, so we don't use that as a variable. But then it turns out tenure, so how long you've been at the bank, skews very heavily. And if you've been at the bank for kind of 40, 50 years, then you are necessarily going to be an older customer. So you've introduced unintended unfair bias. Our tooling allows us to check for those kinds of relationships that might be otherwise difficult for somebody to see. And that's how we make sure we stay true to our purpose in the application of AI ethically.
Wow. Yeah, I never would even thought that. I suppose that makes sense. Yeah, it's just another indication of age. And so, Shira, you're very focused on obviously consumer and payments and lending. What sort of ethical issues are you running up to or seeing?
Yeah, I think, so a couple of things, right? Like Dan mentioned, one is definitely the explainability of it, which is when you make a decision, you need to be able to stand by it and prove to a regulator or someone else why you made that decision. But the other way to solve for that problem, and that's what we're trying to think about, is what goes into it. And if you do design thinking, the idea is you can either solve a problem or you can avoid a problem. And the way to avoid a problem is making sure the features that go into these models are themselves by design, not in a way that can discriminate people. Like Dan mentioned, the literal name of some of these techniques are called discriminant analysis. They are supposed to discriminate, like you mentioned, literally. And so if you make sure that the factors, that features that go in are not some things that a human being realizes can be discriminatory, that is the first step. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. I'll give you a marketing example. In the marketing example, instead of marketing for who someone is, if we market for what they need or what they do, which basically makes a lot of difference. So instead of marketing for an age or a gender or any of those variables, if we market for their current needs, their current wants, and their prior behavior, I think that's a completely different way to solve the problem. So if you're building a personalization algorithm, instead of the features being and the data set containing discriminatory variables like age, gender, etc., it should ideally have variables that are mostly behavioral. So that's one way that we like to solve for it, and that kind of make sure that the discriminatory variables and some kind of discrimination doesn't happen. The other one is also the fact that by design, and that's why I also alluded to the fact of model governance and such, is you need somebody policing the police, right? And that's exactly, so if you watched the, I don't remember the name of the show. It's called Line of Duty or something. So the idea is you need somebody to police the police. You need models to govern the models. And so what we've in previous lives have set up is where there are algorithms that monitor the repository of algorithms and look for variables, look for patterns, look for things that are outside how things should be. And then how do we control for that? I think that's the other way we try to solve for it. But yes, I think the examples Dan gave are very pertinent. So they do exist. I'm worried about how do we come around it and try to solve for them.
Yeah, well, it's a minefield, and the more AI we use and the more data and more use cases, it's only going to accelerate. But it's great to see that we're using technology to solve that, like the police, police and the police analogy. I think we're pretty much up to time on the panel. Do we have, I believe there was an audience question?
Yes, Neil, we do have an audience question. Would you like me to address it?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay. So the question is for Dan. Dan, Claire Hockey asked that at some point, how have Combank customers reacted to customer engagement engine, or is it completely seamless to them? They're looking at talking about reactions to the bot. Dan, over to you.
Sure. So thanks for the question, Claire. I mean, there are kind of, I guess, two ways to sort of think about the answer to that. I mean, we think it's an incredibly positive thing to do for our customers. Neil talked earlier about, where do we get to the point where the, every single, we think about, we have 7.5 million digitally active customers. How can we personalize the app so it's unique to every single one of those? And the customer engagement engine is an important part of that. One of the ways that we kind of stay on top of the many, many different conversations that we have with customers and measure the success is obviously through data. We have control groups. We have a very sophisticated experimentation framework that allows us to test and learn, what works for different types of customers, what doesn't. So measurably, we know that we're producing increasingly better and better customer experiences because the data tells us so. But the other is just in terms of the actual human interactions, and the stories that we get are just fantastic. I can give you one example. So thanks to AI and the customer engagement engine, we now have a real-time feed of all of the extreme weather events that happen in Australia in real time. And unfortunately, we get quite a few, and they can be incredibly high stress for our customers here, of course, bushfires. And you think about the recent flooding events near the Sydney region where I currently live. We were able to get to 700,000 customers with the support that we have available to them as a bank. And that's just a fantastic way, and we get lots of interaction from our customers. We're incredibly grateful to feel that they're supported by our frontline people. Now, if there's a bushfire going on and you go into a branch in an area where there's a bushfire, the person in branch is going to know that there are fires in the area, so they're obviously going to treat you incredibly sensitively and be there to give you the very specific support that's available to our customers in those events. But if you call up from one of these regions, you may be speaking to somebody thousands of miles away. Australia's a huge country. So through the customer engagement engine, that's how we make sure that in that staff interaction, the member of staff is speaking to that customer and letting them know instantly that we know exactly that you're in this high stress information situation. And that's how we're able to be personal. And that just produces a wealth of incredible customer stories that are really motivating for us as a kind of AI and decision science team to keep producing more and more of these things that produce great outcomes for people.
Sure.
Thanks for the question, Claire.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Dan. And I hope Claire Hockey has got the answer what was looked for in this question. So thank you so much, Claire, on that. Also, Ryan Morris comments that thank you to all the panelists, a very informative session. So we're getting a lot of comments, live comments and questions coming in. Neil, in interest of time, of course, you being a wonderful moderator, firstly, a big thank you from our side. Neil, we'd love you to conclude from your side, or if you'd like certain concluding statements from your eminent panelists, you could do so in the next few minutes. I'm on your cue. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've been taking extensive notes. I'm kind of an old warhorse when it comes to conferences. I think I've spoken several hundred by now, and so it's nice and refreshing when I actually sit there. I'm learning quite a lot through this panel. So thank you. I've genuinely from all the panelists, I have learned something new in this session. I liked your quote, Dan, that AI is a fundamental enabler to make customers' lives better. I thought, what an interesting insight that we and a label that we use for a piece of technology. We don't say that about a database or a piece of middleware. And I thought that was fascinating. I think your point on ethics, Shira, around AI policing themselves, AI policing the AI. And I would never have thought of that. I thought that's reusing an AI to police another AI is ethically correct, and I suppose that could go on and on. And really just the scale that these engines can get to, getting some insight into the Commonwealth Bank, and I'm sure we'll all agree, and that's that's amazing. And I'd love to come and spend more time with you, Dan. But I suppose that's the kind of my synopsis. Dan and Shira, any last words?
No, I like that Shia brought up line of duty. I think one of the only things that I don't like about living in Australia is I check the news on a Monday morning with my people in the UK, and people are spoiling what's happened the night before. So somebody needs to introduce some ethical AI to stop that happening. That would be great. But no, I mean, I think the important thing about this space is it's growing. It's learning. I've learned a lot from Shira and Sunny as well. I think we have some common themes here, and it's just it's exciting, challenging. But as we can see already from some of the use cases that we've got, the rewards are worth it. It's an incredible future that we have in front of us, I think.
And yep, thanks Neil and Dan for all your thoughts. It's good to learn from people who are trying to do it at scale. And from me, the only thing I would say is the conversation needs to shift from needing to do AI to what happens after we do it. What I call the rom-com syndrome is, yes, you've fallen in love, you've gotten married, what happens afterwards is basically where the conversation needs to move to.
Yeah, and that could be a messy divorce if we have to divorce our AI.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it needs to get.
So that's everything from me. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your conference today.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shira. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Neil, for joining us. And of course, Sonny, thank you for your valuable time as well. Thank you once again on behalf of TrustCon Global.